All right, I told myself I need to be out of Daniel by 9:05, so we got 3 minutes here, because there's just too much good stuff in Ezekiel. I just want to tease a little bit the latter half of the book of Daniel that we didn't get to. There's some things that just are remarkable to me. The first of which, on question 8, as it's talking about chapter 8, is the way that the nations that are not yet in power are named. So we talked a lot last week, and if you didn't get a handout with the visions of Daniel, we talked about these 4 successive kingdoms that were going to come onto the world stage. We talked about the Babylonians, followed by the Medes and the Persians, followed by the Greeks, followed by the Romans. And that gets us down to the days in which the kingdom would be established or Christ would come. What's fascinating about chapter 8, multiple things are fascinating, but if you look at verse 20, Daniel 8, verse 20, it's after this vision of a ram that's defeated by a shaggy goat that flies so fast that it doesn't even touch the ground as it comes and hits him. Verse 20 says, "The ram which you saw with the 2 horns represents the kings of Media and Persia." So this isn't us guessing at who these kingdoms are. And then the very next verse, "The shaggy goat represents the kingdom of Greece, and the large horn that is between his eyes is the first king." So the first king of Greece, that's very clearly Alexander the Great. And that conquest that he proceeds to make across the world is in the years 334 to 323 BC. So this is well over 200 years in the future that Greece would conquer Persia. And Greece, just being a small collection of city-states that weren't even united at this time, that's a significant prophecy. And for it to show, to say that the first king is like this is remarkable. And according to Jewish writings, Alexander is actually welcomed as he comes, as you can see his route from Macedonia all the way to India when he finishes conquest. You can see it goes through Jerusalem. And he was actually welcomed as a liberator when he came through. And the tradition says that the high priest showed him the book of Daniel and showed him that this was prophesied, that you would come. And so he, of course, felt like he was ordained by the gods to conquer the world. So Daniel does conquer the world, but as is mentioned in this prophecy, it's a short-lived reign because Alexander dies young and doesn't have an heir, and so he gives his kingdom to his 4 generals. And so in that Daniel 8, verse 22, it very clearly says that the broken horn becomes 4 horns. And so the kingdom is broken up into 4 pieces, not very evenly, but you can see how Seleucus is this light green color who owns all this territory to the east, including the town of Antioch. And he actually is the one who names, or one of his successors names it Antioch. And so then you have a few Seleucid kings who are named Antiochus, and that town is named after them. That's kind of what the prophecies of Daniel will zero in on, is the activity of these Seleucid kings. Because as you can see, there's 2 kingdoms on either side of the Holy Land during that period. There's the Egyptian kingdom, which are called the Ptolemies. That's that darker green color. And the northern kings are these Seleucid kings, which they're going to then battle over the Holy Land, and that's going to bring a lot of trouble for God's people. That's what the book of Daniel prophesies extremely clearly. So clearly, in fact, and we won't look in too much detail at chapter 11, but it's almost like reading the newspaper if you were living in about 160 BC. Doesn't make a lick of sense to us without studying the history of 160 or so BC. But if you do, you're surprised by how detailed it is on all of what happens in the Holy Land between this northern kingdom and southern kingdom when you're in the spot of Jerusalem. What's to your north and what's to your south. It's what causes liberal scholars to say Daniel could not have been written by Daniel. Couldn't have been written in the courts of Babylon because it describes what happens between these kings in 160 BC. We believe by faith that it was written by Daniel, and there's plenty of evidence that it was. They're stuck with a problem that it was either somebody who knew everything that was going on and was writing after the fact, or somebody who knew the details of what was going on in the Babylonian Empire, which Daniel clearly did. I'm already 3 minutes past my target. So we won't talk too much about the 70 weeks prophecy. I'd love to spend some time on that, but I think we need to focus on the book of Ezekiel. So flip over to Ezekiel chapter 1. Hopefully you spent some time in that book this week. This is what you get when you ask the AI to make an image of Ezekiel chapter 1. And if you've studied this a little bit before the bell this morning, you'll probably see some problems with it because the AI hallucinates a little bit. But, the bulk of it is pretty interesting. You'll see the wheels. Did you notice wheels in that prophecy? Yeah, and here's another one. One of them, Jason did these for me, one in Gemini, one in ChatGPT. Here's another one. And as you've studied chapter 1, you probably see that some things are not exactly right. For one, how many living creatures are there below the throne? 4. So I don't know why they left one out. There should always be 4. They're always described that way, but they are associated with these wheels. We don't know if they're like chariot wheels or something else. I kind of imagine them moving kind of like Milo on his new hoverboard, if you've seen these kids rolling around on their hoverboard. But it's just this idea of these guys aren't touching the ground, and they're moving, and the wheels move wherever they move. And their spirit is one with the wheel. Sounds very much like the way we control our technology today. But this is God's technology. It's supernatural. The other thing that's not shown in this image is the multiple faces that are on these living creatures. There's 4 faces on each living creature, and the first image tried to show that, but kind of garbled that up a little bit as well. But what you should notice is there's 4 living creatures, and above those living creatures is a throne. And on that throne is a presence which seems to represent what? It seems to be God. That's right. It's a vision of the glory of the Lord. And so we could all maybe draw a little bit better picture, a little more precisely. This one shows him a little bit more like the traditional images of Jesus. But either way, I also notice at the bottom Ezekiel's reaction, right? What was Ezekiel's reaction? He fell on his face. You see that in Daniel, and you see it again in Ezekiel. When these men encounter God or an angel from God, they are terrified. A lot of times they just fall asleep because they're so overwhelmed. They pass out. And sometimes they have to be roused. I've got a message for you. Wake up. Stand on your feet. And so that's exactly what happens to Ezekiel. So he sees this heavenly vision. Anything else that stands out to you from that vision in chapter 1? You want to check that? I'm not sure if someone was trying to get in or if someone was locking up. Anything stand out to you in chapter 1? Clarissa?
Just that he was told to eat the scroll, which would be like eating God's word, basically.
That's right. Technically, that's chapter 2, isn't it? Chapter 2, verse 9, he's given a scroll. And how did the scroll taste? Sweet. Yeah. It was sweet in his mouth, a message that God's giving to him that was pleasant to him. Interesting, because a lot of the prophets have had kind of a bitterness to their message, but Ezekiel now, maybe because he's prophesying more about the glorious future, it's a sweeter message. I'll tell you one thing that I've kind of associated with this heavenly vision of 4 living creatures beneath the throne of God, with God upon that throne. That reminds me very much of something that God instituted in Israel, and that was the Ark of the Covenant, which was carried by who? carried by the Levites, and how many men? Yeah, you'd have those 2 poles that go through, and you'd have 4 Levites carrying the ends of those poles. And so, obviously, these things are true. This is the heavenly reality put in terms that we can understand. And he makes copies of the heavenly things when he puts things on earth. And so he's got men carrying his seat where he makes his name dwell, where he is present. And God's presence is above those 4 living creatures. Humans in the case of the ark, but here it's these extremely powerful living creatures or cherubim. Such an amazing chapter. If you read that, you'll have to think on it for a while. But you're going to see this same image all the way through the book of Ezekiel, where these 4 living creatures with God above them are seen doing different things throughout the book. So question 2 gets to kind of what Clarissa was pointing out about him eating this book. How did God describe the people to which Ezekiel was sent? Rebellious. Any other adjectives? Stubborn. Impudent. Okay.
Disrespectful.
What did he say about whether or not they should listen?
If they listen or not, just tell it to them.
Tell them even if they won't listen, right? That's a pretty typical instruction to a prophet. Was he expecting them to listen? No. I thought that we had, whittled the people of God down to the good ones, right? Because this is the exiles, and they're away in captivity. Perhaps this is actually a reference to the people who are still yet in Jerusalem, because Ezekiel does go into captivity before the destruction of the temple, before the complete destruction of the city. It was about 7 years before. And so maybe this is a reference to those who are going to be destroyed by God, because we'll talk about the remnant here in just a second. But they are obstinate. And how does he prepare Ezekiel? Chapter 3 there, what does he give him?
It says he made his head hard and his face hard like theirs. That's what my text says.
Verse 8 where he makes him eat the scroll.
Makes him eat the scroll, yes. But 3 verse 8, he talks about, like Dad says, he's made his face hard, his forehead hard. How hard? Drew and Marissa will like this part. As hard as emery. As emery, harder than flint. That's an interesting name for your daughter. She may be a little hard-headed. That's the New American Standard. It may not be in every version, but check verse 9. Like emery, harder than flint. So that's a very hard stone. And so it's the idea of you're going to be butting heads with these people. So get ready, get your helmet on, and you'll be able to endure. So he's going, verse 11, to the exiles, whether they listen or not. So what's the lesson we should take away from that? What does God expect from all of his servants?
To teach no matter the reception.
Yep. You might need, a hard head in some ways. People might call you closed-minded. How closed-minded should we be? As closed-minded as the Scriptures are, as open-minded as the Scriptures are. You might need thick skin, right? They're going to call you names, right? You got to be tough. So the Scriptures, show prophets being toughened up for a difficult job. And so we've got to get tough as well, to be ready to spread the word no matter what the reaction is going to be. Any other thoughts on question 2? So question 3, and jumping ahead to 33, you have 2 references to this watchman. Ezekiel is being called as a watchman, and 33 goes into a lot more detail about the watchman's duty. So what's required of a faithful watchman?
To warn of danger and of judgment.
Okay. Yeah, you see this image here of he's blowing that horn. He's standing on the wall, and why does the man on the wall blow his horn?
He sees the enemy coming.
Yeah.
Warn the others.
Warn the people in the city, right? It's time to take up arms and be ready to defend the city. So his job is, I see danger coming. How do I need to get everybody ready. And so what if he doesn't blow his horn? What does God say about that kind of a watchman?
And he will be held accountable.
Yeah, the wicked are still going to die, but I'm going to require that of your hand. You're guilty of not warning them. And so a watchman is delivered and not guilty if he sounds the warning. So there again, you see these expectations of God's servants. We have to be strong-headed teachers, and we don't need to shy away from it. Because if we don't warn the wicked, then we're just as guilty as they are. We've been given a job to be one who sounds the warning. Any other thoughts on that? Questions? Okay. Let's look at this concept of the faithful remnant. You see it through here, and we've touched on it in a few of the other prophets. But let's notice how Ezekiel describes it. If you're looking at chapter 5, Ezekiel is given a number of visions, and I wish we could look at each one. I think there's about 14 visions in the book, and some of them are demonstrations where he's told to do something so that other people can learn from what he's doing. Chapter 5, what's he told to do with his hair? Cut it. Take a sharp sword, cut it off, and then I want you to do certain things with your hair so that everyone can see. I want you to divide it. 1/3, verse 2, 1/3 burn with the fire at the center of the city when the days of the siege are completed. Then you shall take 1/3 and strike it with the sword all around the city, and 1/3 you shall scatter to the wind, and I will unsheath a sword behind them. So he's describing what's going to happen to Judah, right? So you got a third. Do any of those thirds sound like good news? No. That should be it, right? That's all of it. You got 3/3, and they're all seeing bad news. But then verse 3, there's a few that are left. Take also a few in number from them and bind them in the edges of your robes. And that's the idea of the remnant. There's the majority, practically all, are destroyed in one of these three ways: the fire, the sword, or the scattering, when they're being pursued by the sword. So the people of God are going to be utterly destroyed, but there will be this remnant. Certainly not the majority, but there's a few who are kept by the prophet, or the concept of kept safe by God. So we get kind of the fewness from this image. What about chapter 6? Chapter 6, verses 8 through 10, what do you get from that image about the remnant?
Those who escape will remember me among the nations to which they will be carried captive.
Okay, so we learned there that there's a remembrance among that group. Being in captivity might bring some of that to their remembrance. What other attitude do they have? Look at Ezekiel chapter 6 and verse 9. It says, "Then those of you who escape will remember me among the nations to which they will be carried captive, how I have been hurt by their adulterous hearts, which turned away from me, and by their eyes which played the harlot after their idols, and they will loathe themselves in their own sight for the evils which they have committed, for all their abominations." This idea of loathing yourself. It can be a healthy attitude when you've sinned greatly against God. Sometimes we look at Psalm 51 as David's psalm that was written after his sin with Bathsheba. And it is that heart of contrite repentance. It says, a contrite heart you will not despise. God loves it, that kind of a heart. I associate this very much with Daniel chapter 9. If you get any time to study Daniel 9, you have Daniel's prayer in Babylon where he is recognizing that the 70 years are up, and he has that attitude. Even though we know Daniel was a faithful young man, I don't know how much sin he was even involved in back in Judah before the exile, if any, but he does have this heart of, I remember that we've been unfaithful to you. It's more of a prayer for his nation and that we sinned against you. And so restore us to the land, not because of any good that we've done, but because of your great name. And he wants God's reputation to be increased. So yeah, this remnant has a good attitude toward their sin. What did Jesus say? Blessed are those who mourn. Not just mourning when maybe a loved one dies, but mourning over sin. That's what we need to be, those who mourn over sin. And then chapter 9, what do you see about the remnant in chapter 9? Chapter 9 is subtitled in my Bible, The Vision of Slaughter. So here again, he's describing the slaughter of his own people. But what does he say there about the remnant?
Said he will give them one heart and a new spirit.
Okay, what verse is that? Sorry, that's not what I was glancing at.
I wish I had written it down. Let me see.
You may be referring to chapter 11. We'll be there in just a second.
Oh,
Yep, let's get there in just a second. If I'm looking at Ezekiel 9, verse 3. So first I want you to notice this amazing image. Then the glory of the God of Israel went up from the cherub on which it had been to the threshold of the temple. He called to the man clothed in linen, at whose loins was a writing case. The Lord said to him, go through the midst of the city, even through the midst of Jerusalem, put a mark on the foreheads of the men who sigh and groan over all the abominations which are being committed in its midst. What's that remind you of? Someone putting a mark on someone's forehead?
the mark of the beast.
Is Revelation.
Yeah, we're probably more familiar with this mark of the beast in Revelation, and it gives this number 666 and the number of his name, the beast. And so that's been mystified, I think, and turned into something that everybody's terrified of and perhaps misunderstands by those who are teaching false doctrine about the end times. What does this image mean in simple terms? Why is God putting a mark on their foreheads?
Those will be the ones who are spared.
All right, these are being marked and set aside as, protected by God. They're the remnant. And so he's, verse 8, alas, Lord God, are you destroying the whole remnant of Israel by pouring out your wrath on Jerusalem? And the answer simply was no. He was not going to destroy the remnant. They had been marked by God. One who had received this mark was protected by God or owned by God. The one who's then received the mark of the beast is one who follows the beast, one who follows the devil. Nothing more complicated than that. So we want to be those who are following God. But what is it? What was the quality that he was looking for? He's going to mark these people if they did what?
Mourned and sighed at all the evil around.
Right. Yeah, there's an emotional response to what they're among. Those who sigh and groan over all the abominations. That means they're not approving of it. They're certainly not participating in it. And so, yes, we can live among great wickedness, and God still approves of us if we have this good heart. And so over in chapter 11, what Dad was mentioning, what was God going to do for these people? I think you were referring to 11 verse 19. I'll give them one heart. and put a new spirit within them. I will take the heart of stone out of their flesh and give them a heart of flesh. And so this people that had been described as, harder than Emery, right, that he's going to be butting heads with this people, God is going to give them a tender heart again. And that's going to be this people that goes into captivity. Reminds me of the image in Jeremiah of the waistband. And it was, go bury this waistband and now go back and get it way up at the river Euphrates. And when he gets it back, it's tattered and worn out. And he talks about how he's going to humble the pride of Judah by sending them into captivity. They're going to come back different. And this is one of the key differences. Their heart is going to be tender again. A heart of flesh can be pricked by his word. A heart of stone cannot be. Any other thoughts that you saw about the remnant? And of course, it's this remnant that we're going to study in the next time period, returning to the land. All right, question 5. And this, to me, is one of the most powerful images in the book that we'll talk about here on questions 5, 6, and 7. So first, let's notice that Ezekiel is shown the great abominations that are happening in Judah. He's been taken away. He's by the river Chebar, which was in Susa, the capital of Persia. So he's thousands of miles away from Judah, but he's taken in the spirit back to Jerusalem to see some things. And so what kinds of abominations did God show him? There's 4 here in chapter 8. What'd you get first?
Worshipping the sun and all kinds of idols.
Yeah, all kinds of idolatry, sun worship. That first one, he takes him to this gate that's north of the altar gate, and it mentions just this idol of jealousy. Pretty general terms, but you can imagine all idols. God says, I am a jealous God, way back in the 10 Commandments. And so any idol might be described that way. This idol of jealousy that's been set up at the north gate. Boy, that's terrible. But where does he go next?
Through the wall.
Yeah, he tells him to dig through the wall. And so we understand the temple has kind of a sequence of walls, and it keeps different people out. There's the court of the Gentiles, and then there's the court of women, and then there's the court of basically that only the priests can go into, and then ultimately the Holy of Holies is where only the high priest can go. And so to be able to see what's going on in there, he's got to dig through the wall. So there was a hole, and God tells him, go ahead and dig through. What did he see going on?
Every form of creeping things and beast and detestable things.
And those things had been carved on the walls. These things that obviously are worshipped by pagans. And who is it that's carving it and worshiping these things?
70 elders.
The 70 elders. One is even called out by name, Jazaniah the son of Shaphan, standing among them with his censer in his hand, burning incense to false gods. Notice verse 12. Ezekiel 8, verse 12. Son of man, do you see what the elders of the house of Israel are committing in the dark, each man in the room of his carved images? For they say, the Lord does not see us. The Lord has forsaken this land. So because of the privacy of, only the Levites are allowed in this area, only the priests in this area, they might get the idea that, no one can see what we're doing, so we're in charge here. We're going to do what we think is best, and what they think is best is worshiping idols. And they even think that the Lord doesn't see them. But clearly, this vision shows God sees it all. God sees everything. Then he's taken to this gate again to the north, and women are weeping for Tammuz. I read that Tammuz is this fertility god, and every season when the winter season comes and everything dies, They would traditionally weep that Tammuz had gone away, and they're praying essentially for Tammuz to return when the rains come back and the spring causes the plants to revive. But just pagan worship. And then verse 16, what does he see in this fourth vision?
Men worshiping the sun.
They're worshiping the sun, which is in which direction if you're in the temple? East. That's the way that the door opens. So it says that their backs are to the temple, and they're prostrating themselves toward the sun. They should be turned toward God, who's in the temple and in his most holy place. But no, they've got their backs to him, and they're worshiping God. He's showing that these are vile abominations. Verse 18, therefore I indeed will deal in wrath. My eye will have no pity, nor will I spare. And though they cry in my ears with a loud voice, yet I will not listen to them. He's taking Ezekiel along as a witness. Do you see what they're doing? It makes me shudder because there's times where I'm hoping that God doesn't see what I'm doing when I commit sin, or what I'm saying when I'm being unkind, or whatever the problem is. I hope that God didn't hear that, but I know in my heart that he knows. And so we should all tremble that God sees, God knows, and we need to humble ourselves in repentance and live a life that is aware that God is with us. And that can be a comforting thing, or it can be a terrifying thing that should help us to remember to serve him faithfully every day. He sees what we do. And there becomes a point where he's seen what we do so repeatedly that he's expecting our cry. There's going to come a day where he's crying out to me because things have gone bad. I'm not going to listen to him because it's not true repentance. It's just now I'm in pain because of what I've brought on myself or what I've brought on my family, whatever it is. We don't want to fall into that terrible place. So this is the proof of what they deserve. And then the image of the glory of the Lord. Here's another picture I found of kind of these four living creatures with the wheels, with the crystal expanse that's above them, and this blue throne. It's described as lapis lazuli. I think that's a blue color. So it's quite often displayed as blue with this fiery image of God on his throne. And in chapter 10, it starts to move. And this is a sad image. Because where do you see this glory of the Lord moving in Ezekiel 10, kind of starting in verse 3 on down to 18?
Finally moves away from the temple.
It's moving away, right? The glory of the Lord is what filled the temple. When did it first fill the temple?
Back when Solomon built it.
Solomon builds it just like he was told to build it, and so the glory of the Lord fills it. That wasn't the first time the glory of the Lord had come, though. It had first filled the tabernacle, right? Way back at Sinai. And they saw the glory of the Lord in a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. So that's what's pictured here. That's where the glory of the Lord is supposed to be. Verse 3, it's essentially in the temple by the cherubim. But then the glory of the Lord moves from the cherubim to the threshold. He's in the doorway. And so then it moves from that threshold and it fills now this glory of the Lord is filling the court. And you look at verse 5 and you see that it's now heard as far as the outer court. And so it's kind of moving outward. And then verse 18, it says, then the glory of the Lord departed from the threshold of the temple and stood over the cherubim. This is, somewhat of a transport for God. He's leaving his house, getting in his vehicle, you might say, and he's leaving. Why is that a sad image?
Because we want God with
We want God with us, absolutely. I recall Exodus 33 or so, where God says, if I went in the midst of the people, I would destroy them. And Moses is interceding, don't forsake your people. We need you to go up in our midst for us to be successful. But he's like, I can't go among the people. I would destroy them if I got close to them. And it's the same idea here, Dad.
Yeah, he doesn't, when we depart from him, then he departs from us.
Yeah.
So we have to take the first move.
Yeah, you think of the long suffering. If he's leaving at this time, how long has he been suffering in their presence, wishing that he could simply wipe them out because they've been so sinful for so long? And he's the same long-suffering God for us today. And so, yeah, chapter 10 is God's glory departing from the temple. And so I wanted you to skip ahead to the end of the book because there's a beautiful image, somewhat in reverse. Ezekiel 40 to 42, if you read through those 3 chapters, great job. They get a little tedious. If you spent a few hours in AutoCAD trying to draw what he's describing, then gold star for that. But he gives such a detailed description of a temple, right? And if you do kind of a side-by-side comparison with the instructions for Solomon's temple, it is different. It's not the same temple. Premillennialists call this the millennial temple, as if this is literally going to be built one day. I don't think that's a correct understanding. It's very similar to what's described over in Revelation chapter 20 of the New Jerusalem that John is able to see. So what do you see? What's the man with the measuring rod doing? Why is he bringing Ezekiel along? What's he showing him?
Well, he's showing him the dimensions of the temple, right?
That's right. He's showing him a city with a temple in it, and he's showing him every dimension. Details, right? He's saying, okay, it's about this. He's got this measuring rod, so it's this tall, 2 rods or a rod and a half. He's measuring the width of the walls, every little detail, verse after verse after verse. And it's not immediately clear what this represents, but flip over to chapter 43. I think the message of the vision is pretty clearly seen in Ezekiel 43. After measuring the city and the temple, you see in that first part of chapter 43, verse 4, and the glory of the Lord came into the house by the way of the gate facing toward the east. And the Spirit lifted me up and brought me into the inner court, and behold, the glory of the Lord filled the house. So this should remind us of what happens in the days of Solomon, right? A perfect temple is built, and God fills the house. Meaning he's able to accept this place. Notice what he says, verse 7. This is 43, verse 7. Son of man, this is the place of my throne and the place of the soles of my feet, where I will dwell among the sons of Israel forever. And the house of Israel will not again defile my holy name, neither they nor their kings by their harlotry or by the corpses of their kings when they die. And skipping down to verse 10, Ezekiel is told to observe this vision and now describe it to the people. He says, as for you, son of man, describe the temple to the house of Israel, that they may be ashamed of their iniquities, and let them measure the plan. If they are ashamed of all they have done, make known to them the design of the house, its structure, its exits, its entrances, all its designs, all its statutes, and all its laws, and write it in their sight so that they may observe its whole design and all its statutes and do them. This is the law of the house. Its entire area on the top of the mountain all around shall be most holy. Behold, this is the law of the house. What's he wanting them to understand? What's this vision show us? What do you take away? Do we need to go build this thing?
It's showing them that God's in control and he expects, complete worship and obedience.
Okay, that's right. The precision of the detail. What does that show about God?
He cares about the details.
He certainly does. Do you notice how he goes from, I want you to notice its structure, exits, entrances, and then he goes to laws and statutes. You know, those are what he's depicting with the specifics. The specifics of the pattern. Yeah, I want it to be this long and this tall. Those are physical things. What I really care about is that there is a law, that there is a statute, and I expect this place to be holy, and those laws must be followed. It reminds me very much of the pattern. In fact, let's see, when it says, verse 10, let them measure the plan, let them measure the plan. What exactly is it that God expects of me? In my margin, it says, let them measure the perfection, or let them measure the pattern. This is what God's expecting of his people. And this is how he can come be among them if they are following the plan. And so this image of a new city, a new place where God can come in and dwell, is fulfilled in the church. When Christ said, upon this rock I will build my church, and he builds the kingdom of heaven in the hearts of men, and in this church that he organizes and his apostles organize, he's preparing a place that God can come and dwell, a place of holiness, of obedience, of following God's laws faithfully. So that's what this city is representing for us. And there's one more image, if you flip just a few chapters forward, where Ezekiel then notices in chapter 47, and this was your question 10, what does he notice is coming from this temple? A river. And so it starts as a trickle of water coming out, flowing down from the right side of the house, from south of the altar. So there's water coming out from the foundation. It sounds like a structural issue, doesn't it? You wouldn't want that coming out from under your house. But this is a blessing where this water is coming out, and as he follows the stream, and there's some interesting pictures, but you can see how next it's up to the ankles, and it's up to the knees, and he keeps going. Now it's enough to swim in, and as he continues following this river, it's flowing such a raging river. It's producing fruit trees of every kind on either side, and it goes even all the way down to where? Did you notice in chapter 47? Goes where?
To the sea.
Yeah, to the sea. And we know geographically that water would flow into the Jordan, which flows down into the Dead Sea. And it says it makes it into a place of life again, a place where fish and everything else can live. And this is an image that we should clearly see of the blessings that come from God. As Jesus stands up at the feast and says, if anyone is thirsty, let him come to me and drink, and offers living water. This is the image that's shown coming from the temple of God. All right, that's all the time we have this quarter. Appreciate your good attention and hope it inspires further study. We'll be moving into the return and restoration period even more so next quarter.